and welcome you back. My name is Diane Donnelly, and I am with the Donnelly Group of Keller Williams Flagship of Maryland, and I run a small real estate team here in Annapolis. And we started these calls due to COVID, and there's so much information and changing information that we wanted to be a resource to you, our listeners, so that you can go somewhere to find real information, real time, and the topics are across the board. Today, we're going to talk about crisis budgeting, which is appropriate because so much unemployment. You know, we're at what, 16%. If we have a second wave of this coronavirus and we have shutdowns again, we could have more unemployment, higher unemployment, people with less disposable income. And I can't think of a better time to talk about budgeting than now. So today we're not only going to talk about budgeting, but we're going to be talking about crisis budgeting. And I have the honor and privilege to introduce Emily today, who is with CCCS MD, which is Consumer, let's see, wait a minute, help me, Emily. Consumer Credit Counseling Services of Maryland. Yeah. And she is our spokesperson for them today. And I just wanted to say hello, Emily, welcome to the call. And if you would, just take a second to introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm beyond excited to be here. I am the spokesperson for CCCSMD, and budgeting is one of my favorite topics in the world. When folks ask me what my hobby is, I only say budgeting. I don't think I have many other hobbies because I'm
going to get you out more, Emily.
No, I'm good. I love it. Well, I'm in the phase of life where I have young children. So yeah. Aside from caring for them, spreadsheets are my thing.
That's wonderful. That's a good thing to be passionate about because it is one of those things that are going to help you. And we talked about this before, where when I hear the word budget or have in the past, I think my first thought is restriction. What can't I do as a result of being on a budget? So there are people that are going to be listening to this call today that have no budget, that never had a budget, or people that have had a budget, fell off the wagon, or people that just really want to tighten down on a budget. So if we could start on a really basic level and just tell me what a budget is.
Sure, absolutely. Before I get into that, I do want to give a little background on CCCSMD because I want everyone to know how we can help in this budgeting process. Because while budgeting sounds, I might make it sound like a very simple thing. If you haven't done it before, it's really good to have somebody hold your hand through the process. So we are a nonprofit housing and credit counseling agency, and our goal is to help people improve or restore their financial health. And we take a very holistic approach to that, one of the big foundations being budgeting and helping folks build a budget and going through it line by line and seeing how we can help them change the way they're living, really, to improve their long-term financial success. We also help with folks that are trying to get a mortgage, that are trying to pay off debt and improving their credit score. So we have a lot of different services that we provide, and we can provide all of those at once to one client. So it depends on individual needs. So we also help with different types of debt like medical and student loan debt. So a wide variety of services, but everything starts with the budget. That is the foundation. That's what determines how much of your money you can put towards improving your financial health. So what is a budget? Besides being my favorite thing, what you said about it being restrictive, that is the most common term I hear, is that folks feel that if they're living on a budget, they can't have fun. They can't go out, they can't enjoy life, they can't go on vacations, they can't shop, and that's just not true. All a budget is, it's a written plan for your money. That is the most basic definition. And that really is all it is. And if you think about it that way, it's just like any other plan you would make. If you have a goal and you have a written plan, you're going to reach that goal. That's exactly what a budget is doing for your money. The same way you might work with a physical fitness trainer to reach a weight loss goal. The same concept. If you don't write it down and make a plan for it, you're not going to get there. So it allows you to control your income. Now, when I talk about control, I think that's one of my favorite aspects of budgeting. We don't have a lot of control in life at all, especially right now. I feel like we can't even control if we're going to walk out the door today or not. Mm-hmm. So having something that we can control, just human nature, makes us feel better. It makes us feel grounded. So a budget, and I'm going to talk about different things about how a budget can improve your financial health, but it also improves your mental health too, because it's giving you that sense of control and peace, that even if there's not enough income this month, you know that up front. You know that, hey, I need to do something to fix this situation. And it doesn't sneak up on you. When you're budgeting, very few things sneak up on you. And when they do, you're much more prepared for them.
I love that. I was going to say, I love how you tied that in from it being just a physical thing, budgeting, to your emotional health. And I agree with what you're saying. And I think I let you know that our coach, our real estate coach, we're right now, this is what we're talking about, budgeting and trying to be as profitable as you can, getting lean, getting rid of debt that you don't need, revisiting things that worked at one time but may not be working. And he has us on a system that we're going to get to in a little bit. And I'm going to show you that we're doing the system that your company has provided and that you guys talk about. And before we get there, what is the difference between a budget and a crisis budget?
Well, structurally, they're going to be the same. So a budget, it very simply looks like listing your sources of income, listing your expenses, and doing very simple math to add up each and then subtract your expenses from your income. So they're going to physically look the same. The difference between a crisis budget and a regular budget is that when we're putting together a crisis budget, we're looking for any area we can to cut costs. We're looking at those expenses and saying, how can we get as lean as possible for this time period? And it's really important to let folks know that this is just in the meantime, because there's a lot of people out there very afraid right now and overwhelmed. And there's a lot of folks that feel like this might be forever, that this pandemic we're in and the unemployment rates we're in. And we have to remind ourselves that this will not be forever, that when we're crisis budgeting, it is temporary. So we always keep the regular budget too, so that we have that to fall back on when times do get better. When we're doing the crisis budgeting, we are looking for a lot of different ways to cut expenses. And we might also have conversations about how do we increase income, because there are ways to do that right now. Even if you're been furloughed or laid off, there's other opportunities out there. Recently, I think as early as this morning, they've been calling for part-time jobs to help with the contact tracing. We can be creative in how we have some extra income.
And I think one of the things that happens when there's a pay cut or in times like this, we go to a place that is in what we don't have anymore. So we don't have this, we don't have the job, we don't have the same income, we don't have this. And I'm going to encourage people to not think that way, but to think what opportunities are ahead of us. So a door closed, there are always doors that will open, and to remain committed to finding the doors to find opportunities to get past where we are now. And I mean, when I was doing my budget for when the pandemic hit, and my focus immediately is do your budget, like get lean immediately overnight. And I cut from between my personal and my business, I cut $2,500 out, and it wasn't hard to do that. And then I got frustrated because if it was that easy to do it, why wasn't I doing it on a regular basis before that, right? But can we talk about some of the things that you tell people to look at, to say, crunch your numbers and look at some of the things that you need to cut? What would you encourage people to do, or how do you ask them to start looking at things that they are able to cut?
Sure. So from a big picture perspective, I think it's important to note that while crisis budgeting is important to do when your income or your lifestyle suddenly change, it's also important to do when the world around you is changing. So for example, if you have a stable income during this pandemic, it's still important to put together a crisis budget. The mentality should be that when the economy is not stable, your community is not stable, that you stockpile cash, that you cut down your expenses as much as you can, you cut down any long-term investing, so that way you're stockpiling some cash because you don't know what's going to happen. But what do we look at? So when you're looking at your budget, there's plenty of things that, like you said, you didn't think of before to cut, but you can certainly cut. Things like any sort of monthly dues or subscriptions. And when you first hear that term, a lot of people think about magazine subscriptions and they say, oh, well, I don't have that. Well, you might have Netflix and you might have Hulu and you probably have Amazon Prime.
Mm-hmm.
And those are really hard things to let go of. And I know because I've been stuck out here in the middle of nowhere with my children for 5 months. So I know how hard it is. And we did make some really big cuts that were pretty scary and added Disney Plus for survival purposes. But we have other subscriptions and monthly expenses that kind of go without thinking about it. Maybe it's apps. Some of the apps that we have on our phone that we maybe rarely use, but we're charged $3 to $7 a month. Well, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does add up. These little things that you can cut out and put a stop on. So I would encourage people to look at anything that they're doing on a monthly basis that is not a need.
Mm-hmm.
And that gets to the hardest conversation to have, wants versus needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had so many conversations with myself, with friends and family of what is a want versus a need. And taking the time to sit down and go line by line with your expenses, really list out everything that comes out of your checking account in a month and ask yourself, is this a need? And if you say yes, wait 5 minutes and ask yourself again. Because sometimes the answer changes. A need, is it something that you cannot survive without? Is it building your 4 walls? Is it feeding your family? If it's not doing those things, can we make a cut? So other areas of entertainment, right now the pandemic has already limited folks' ability to eat out and go on random shopping trips. But when you're in any sort of crisis that doesn't have stay-at-home orders, it is important to look at those things. And as the restaurants and the stores start reopening, we want to look at that too. And it's interesting, if you haven't been on a budget before, or even if you have one, to take a look at February, and January, and look at how much money you spent eating out, going shopping for things that were wants, and tally that up compared to what you've spent in the last 5 months. And for a lot of folks, it's dramatically less. And what that tells you is that you can survive on less. And while you may want to go back to your previous lifestyle of eating out and shopping, you shouldn't right now. You definitely shouldn't in a crisis, but you might not want to do that in general, because you might have other financial goals that are more important to you when you sit down, especially with sitting down with one of our financial advocates and looking at, what are my real goals? What debts do I have to pay off? Do I want to save for a down payment on a home? If I cut these things out now, 6-7 months from now, I might be able to reach some of those a lot faster than I ever thought I would.
Mm-hmm. And I think to underscore that, I think it's really important when you're getting ready to do this budget is to say, why am I doing it? What is important at the end of the day? Because I think that somebody is more likely to stick to a budget if they say, I'm going to stick to a budget because I want to buy a house in 6 months and I need to save $10,000 to do that. And in order to do that, I need to save this much money per month. And I think that people are more likely to stick to it. Same thing like with the diet. If you just said, I want to lose weight, easy to fall off the tracks.
Yes.
Ask me how I know. But if you say, I need to lose 14 pounds between now and when I go on my trip because I want to look good and feel good in a bathing suit, or I just for health reasons have to lose it. But if you have what your why is and post it up above and say, I want to do this because, and then do it, I think it's going to be easier to stick to. And I heard you say sometimes what you are saving for is more important than what your desire is in the moment, right?
Absolutely. It's, the beauty of a budget is it gives you that short-term and long-term vision. So you can see how the decisions today will impact you 5-6 months from now. My personal budget goes out 3 years. It's pretty overwhelming. Very
Oh,
simple.
I need to sit with you, Emily, for a little while.
Anytime, anytime. And our financial advocates will show you that. They'll show you how going line by line, you can make adjustments that at the end of the day will either put more money in your pocket or put more money towards your real goals. It makes decisions a lot easier. It gives you the peace to know that you made a decision that's in line with this plan you already set for yourself. So absolutely, knowing your why, keeping that motivation going. The other thing that really helps folks stay on their budget is having a physical budget that they like to visit. Because when you have a budget, you're gonna, when you first start out, you're gonna visit it almost every day because you're gonna be making tweaks because you'll forget about certain expenses. I've been doing this for years. I still forgot that we had our annual trash bill due this week. It happens. So you wanna always have something that you're comfortable going to. There's a few different formats that people can use. The one is just traditional pen and paper. A lot of people are just comfortable with having it handwritten and just having it on their desk next to them or in their kitchen, having it somewhere easily accessible for them. And that works great, especially if you do it in pencil though. I recommend pencil.
Yep.
The other way is spreadsheets. So that's where my heart lies. I love spreadsheets. And you can make that spreadsheet however you want. You can make it as simple or as complex as you feel. I always recommend that you start really simple and then build upon it as you go. But spreadsheets give you a lot of flexibility in playing with the formulas and going out. The reason I can go out 3 years is because all it takes is a drag. It's a very easy process to make my spreadsheet go out many columns. And the beauty of that, what I like is that I can make a change today and I can see instantly what that does to my bottom line 6 months from now. And that's really important to me right now as we're making big decisions for school and future in general. It's a crazy future we have.
So may I ask you 2 questions?
Sure.
One is, how about people that are on commission where they don't have the luxury of saying, I make $5,000 a month, every month, regardless, and now I do my budget. So one is, can we address how you handle that when you don't know what next month is going to be? So you don't know how to budget from the top line down. And the second one is, what happens if your partner doesn't have the same commitment to a budget that you might? How do you suggest, without getting divorces, how do you suggest?
Yeah. 2 very big questions. So for irregular income, there are a few different ways that you can address that. And one is taking your best estimate for the year and dividing that over the months. If you have seasonal income, it's a little bit easier because you know when your highs and lows are going to be. You're going to want to cut expenses a lot more in the winter if your income is primarily coming in during the summer. So kind of understanding exactly what job you're in, where the income's coming from. And that's what our financial advocates will do. They'll sit down with you and understand how is your income, how does your income flow? And for a lot of folks, it's irregular. And that's the beauty of the budget being flexible. And if something changes, we can easily go in and update it for additional income or a cut in income.
Okay.
Yeah. And the issue of your spouse or partner not being on board, that's really hard. It's very difficult to stick to any plan when both partners are not on board. I too go back to the weight loss example because I think handling money is most similar in our society to how we handle weight loss. And if you're living in a house where you're trying to lose weight and everybody in the house is eating Burger King every night, that's not going to help you. That's probably going to deter you from reaching your goals. So I encourage folks to be on the same page. One way you can do that is when you do come to CCCS MD, come together, come to our financial advocates as a couple. Even if the other person's not on board, you say, hey, this is really important to me. Please come and let's just see where it goes. And usually over time, the reluctant partner will see that this is for the family's benefit, that there's a legacy issue here. It's not just how are we living today, it's how are we going to live 40 years from now? How are our children going to live when we're long gone? And it becomes much bigger than themselves. And when you can see that today's simple budget is bigger than you and it's much wider, that helps people get on board. Mm-hmm. And I encourage folks to expand their financial literacy. So we do a lot of educating. We have a budget workshop. We do education for what to expect when you're going to buy your first home. Any education you can get is going to help you make better decisions, and it will help folks get buy-in if they didn't. So even if they were, on the fence, is this really for me? Should I budget? Should I reach out for help with my budget? The more you learn, the more confident you will be that, yes, this is a good thing. And yes, it's great to get help and you're not in this alone. Podcasts. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you go ahead. You go ahead, Emily. You were in the middle of a thought.
I was just going to say that podcasts are another great way, listening to some financial experts and hearing people's personal stories of how they overcame financial hardships, especially during a crisis, is very motivating.
Mm-hmm. So how much does your services cost for somebody to come in and do work with you guys?
Our sessions are free, so they can call us, and right now we're doing everything virtually, and it's going really well, doing our sessions over the phone. And if you call our number, the financial advocates will help you right away. They do very in-depth sessions as you go along, but they'll help you in a lot of different areas. They'll just talk with you, get to know your situation, and see what's the best thing for you. Down the road, as you get to more complex services, here and there are fees, but generally a lot of our services are free.
I think that's incredible. When you told me that, I was shocked to hear that, shocked. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you to CCCS MD. I think it's phenomenal what you guys do. So I wanted to back up. So I'm doing my budget. I am a real estate agent, or I am somebody that's commissioned. And I'm going to say that, I'm going to start there because that's the hardest, right, of the budgets. If you have a fixed income, that's much easier. So I wanted to take it to a complicated part. So I am a self-employed real estate agent. I make $50,000 in a year. Generally, I end up at the end of the year at about $50,000. So I don't know what this year holds, but I'm going to anticipate, if I continue doing what I'm doing, I'm going to work my budget at 50,000, right? So the top line item is 50,000. Then I'm going to take all of my fixed expenses and my variable expenses, and I'll ask you to define those. I'm going to take all of my fixed and variable expenses, and I'm going to start to take them out. And then at the end of the day, I'm going to have a budget. So you're going to tell me, all right, Diane, so for the restaurants, for entertainment, you've got $100 a month that you can spend. My challenge has always been, because I pay a lot of bills because I have my own business. So I pay $50 for the sign, and I have to pay the lockbox people, and I have to pay this, and I have to pay this. So I have a lot of outgoing expenses because I have a business. How do I track that $100? That was a poor example because it was entertainment. Let's just say it was the sign company. How do you track that in the midst of your business or your personal business? How do you say, okay, I have $100 to spend on restaurants and I'm at $85. Like, how do you record? That's what I'm looking for. How do you record what you're spending so that you know you're staying on track for that $100?
Sure, that's a great question. And that's why I love the spreadsheet method, honestly. So when you have a budget, now when you come to us, our financial advocates will help you create a basic budget so that you know what your income and expenses look like and what that bottom line number is. But then you can take that information and turn it into what works for you. There's apps out there that you can use that will do this, that will track what you're spending. You can link them to your bank account, or you can log the expense right there as you're making it. I don't use that. I've not been good at the apps. I don't know why. But with a spreadsheet, what you would do is very often, almost daily, when we're in a crisis like this, you'd go to your spreadsheet and you would change your budgeted amounts to actuals. So you would start updating as you go. And I use a simple trick. I just put in bold when it's an actual. And that's how I know, oh, this is already spent. And you can see how how you're doing against your budget. And also, let's say you had $100 for restaurants and you've already spent that. So you already have logged that we had 3 transactions this month that already equaled $100, but my friend's coming in from out of town and I really want to see her and I really want to go out to eat. Can I afford this? Well, if you're going to go $50 over budget, you just plug the number in and see what it does for the next period. And if it works, it works, and you're good, and you can give yourself that breathing room in your variable expenses to go spend a little more in some months. If it doesn't, then you've got to find an alternative answer. And what I want people to know is that the answer isn't always no, you can't do it, and that's it. It's, can I think of something else? So maybe $50 isn't going to work, but 15 will. Well, for $15, you can cook a nice meal for 2 people. You should do it outside right now, just saying.
Yep. Socially distanced.
Yeah, socially distanced with masks on until you're ready to eat.
Whole new conversation you're having, Nicole, right?
It's crazy. But you can do that and make those adjustments as you go.
Are you allowed to, and allowed's not a good word, is it? Because that sounds like you can or you can't. Is it recommended that if you do have your guest and you need to, you're interested in going out to dinner to have a dinner and you're allocating $50 to the dinner, can you say, okay, instead of, I'm going to go over budget in this account, but I'm going to take $50 away from my other account? Can you steal and adjust from different categories?
Absolutely. In the variable expenses.
Expenses, yeah.
Your fixed expenses, you can't do much with. Your fixed expenses are those that you have a legal obligation to pay. They're typically monthly, things like your mortgage or car payment, where they're secured loans and you have to pay on them, or you will be in a lot of trouble or lose your assets. So once you've accounted for your fixed expenses, you can play with your variable expenses any way you want. I would be slow to make changes. That's always the key, is really think it through. Do I want to make this change? Depending on what the variable expense is. I know right now a lot of folks are canceling their gym memberships, but they're spending money on virtual physical fitness memberships. So there's a lot of online websites that have started doing gym memberships where you can have access to their workouts. So they're shifting that money between their gym, their line item for the gym, and their line item for entertainment, because that's really streaming entertainment. So it's definitely okay to do that.
Okay, I love that. And if I may, this wasn't one of the questions on here, but during a crisis budget, do you recommend paying, let's say people have credit card debt, do you recommend making a minimum payment on credit card debt or hitting it hard and paying more than to bring the value or the revolving debt down, or just pay the minimum and just keep your money safe? What's the recommendation? I know every scenario is different. We should say that, right? Obviously, but what's your thought on that?
Well, I think there's really only 2 scenarios when it comes to this question. The first scenario is if you're on a debt management plan, which is something that we do at CCCS MD. We help folks get on a debt management plan. If you're on that plan, you want to call us right away. And we encourage our clients that if you're already in a plan, don't make any changes on your own. Don't panic, just call us and we'll see what we can do to help manage the payment that you are obligated to pay. If you're not on that kind of plan and you're managing your own debt payoff, you definitely want to just pay minimums during this time.
Okay.
And for folks that had long-term plans, that's really hard. And when it comes to if they're paying off credit cards, if they're paying off student loans or a mortgage, and they were really excited to get to that point, it can be very heartbreaking to all of a sudden slash your payments towards your debt by 75%. So you have to keep telling yourself over and over, this is just temporary. In a crisis budget, I'm going to pay the minimums, because in a crisis, you want to stockpile the cash. You want to make sure that you have money if something happens to your employment, if something happens to your health right now. These are very serious things that unfortunately cost a lot of money. So the more you can cut, the better. So paying the minimums, absolutely do that. And then when things get better and things start to calm down, you've got all that cash in savings. So don't allocate that somewhere else because pretend it's not there. Put it in your savings, take it out of your budget. Do not spend what you were spending to pay down debt. And then hopefully 6-7 months from now, when things are better, you can take that pile and put it right towards the debt. And you're not losing that much in the interest penalties. It's not worth worrying about the interest that you're going to be paying. It's not worth the worry about that for the peace of mind that you have the cash in a crisis.
That makes complete sense, because I think that not having the cash in the crisis, the nervousness and the fear far outweighs, should I put $5 extra towards this minimum payment or not? That's
Yes.
a really good point. And then one last question on that is, that I know of, there's two schools of thought. One is when you're paying down debt, to pay it down with the highest interest rate first. And another one that says, no, don't do that. Pay down the one that has the lowest balance so you can get some freedom. Can you speak to that at all?
Sure, absolutely. So when you come to us and we are financial advocates, we work with you to determine the best way to pay off your debt. We'll help you make a plan for that that's very personal to your situation. But in general, it's the best way to do it is to start with that smallest payment and to line up your debts from smallest to largest. And what that does is it's actually building momentum. When you start to pay off small debts, you're achieving smaller goals and you're building that encouragement that, hey, I can do this. If you start with something like a student loan that may be $50,000 and it takes you 2 years to pay it off, there's a lot of room in that 2 years for you to fall off that wagon, for you to get frustrated and upset and feel like you're never going to achieve it. But if you start with a credit card that has maybe $2,500 on it and you pay it off in 3 months, all of a sudden you say, oh, I could do this. I did it. I paid one. And it also builds you a plan for paying off that debt. So you take everything you can. So picture all your debts lined up. And no matter what, you're going to pay at least the minimums on every single debt. Any money you have left over in your budget after you've taken out all of your fixed and variable expenses, anything you have left, you would put towards that smallest debt. Then once that debt is paid off, you would take all of that money and add it to the minimum payment on the next smallest debt. So that by the end of this, you're paying a significant amount on those large debts. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to be doing, is paying off, getting that momentum and feeling that motivation that, hey, I can do this and I'm doing it.
Yeah, I can see that easily. So my car payment, I'm just about done with my car payment. So the car payment, let's say my car payment was $400. I'm going to continue that $400, but instead of funneling it to my car, I'm just going to funnel it and put it into a savings account because I know that I can afford it because I have been. So I'm just going to take that $400, put it into an account so that I'm still not going to touch it. So whereas it was going directly to the car payment company, now I'm just going to say, okay, instead of doing that, rewire it and put it into this account. One of the other things that in real estate, a lot of people get into challenging times is because they don't anticipate the taxes. So they get a beefy check and they sold a house and they made $6,000 on the house, their commission, $6,000. And they take that and they do their budget based on $6,000. But it's not their money. So one of the things that I encourage everybody to do if you are in a commission sales job is to take out your taxes and immediately put it into a different account because it's not your money to spend. And what happens is someone might have a bad month. We've all been there. Have a bad month and we say, okay, I need to spend the $6,000. So I'm going to just spend that and I'll make it up next time. Well, next time doesn't come. And the snowball effect comes. And in 12 months, your accountant is saying, okay, you owe $15,000 in taxes and you don't have it. Yeah. So don't treat your full commission as full commission because it's not yours. Take it, pay the taxes, and that's like step one. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. With any self-employment situation, you want to make sure you're accounting for those taxes right away. If you have an accounting system, you can set it up to do it for you, or your accountant can do it for you, but you definitely want to be doing that up front. You don't want to be blindsided at the end of the year. Even with for folks that are just getting a normal paycheck from an employer though, they want to think about that too, that sometimes our deductions aren't right. So one of the things that we can help people look at is look at their paycheck, and are your deductions appropriate for you? Is there a better way we can set your deductions so that you have more cash now, or vice versa? Do you need to have more taken out of your paycheck so that you're prepared for the tax bills or healthcare bills down the road?
That's really good. And to think that most of your services are free is really amazing to me. And I want to get that word out to everybody across the board. If you have any questions, it doesn't mean you're in financial ruin. It just means if you want some guidance on debt management, on credit, on crisis budgeting, on regular budgeting, on how to prepare to buy a home, et cetera. These are all things that you guys offer. And on a slide coming up, we're going to have your information as a spokesperson for them on how to reach out. But I encourage you that if you're watching now, please share this on your page. And I encourage you that if you, subsequent to our call, but you're watching the recorded, please share this with your people, because it's a free service and we are going to find ourselves in need of this if you're not now. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with seeking help with a budget if you just don't know how to do it. I was started to tell you that that's what our main focus is right now. And so I have these blank envelopes that so home repairs for our dogs, the restaurant, vacation fund, my personal. So I have all of these different envelopes. So what my coach tells me to do is say, okay, let's say that my budget is, my debt structure is $1,000 a month, and I've broken it up into these 10 categories. And let's say that it's $100 for each one. I take $1,000 out of my account and I put my $100 in each of these different 10 categories. And I carry these with me. And when they say, okay, your pet, I take my $100 out, I give it to them and they give me change. I put it back in my pet envelope. And that's how I'm going to run my business for a while. And when it's out, it's out.
Yep.
Right. It's out. It's out. And I've busted my pet thing. I've had a dog. My dog just recently had surgery. So my pet budget is blown for the next, I think, 11 years. I can't have one more pet bill for 10 years. But I really like the idea of that because I can feel the difference and I can feel progress. And that's really important during right now, as you said, with COVID and feeling like there's nothing within my control. That's anxiety,
Yes.
ridden, to feel like you've got no control of anything. Welcome back. You do. You've got some control of this.
And not just that, I love the envelope system. I personally lived on the envelope system for about 2.5 years while I was working to pay off debt. And when you first start it, you have to give yourself some grace to know that it's okay to be wrong in what you allocated to each envelope. So it's okay that you thought you only needed so much money for grocery shopping, but you need more, especially in a time like now where you're probably doing grocery shopping a lot differently than you did before. I know for me, I do it as fast as humanly possible, but folks are buying more food for the house because they're not going out. So you might be wrong in what you think you need, and that's okay. But there's going to be another envelope that's going to have to fork over to fill that one up.
Envelopes.
Yeah. And that's okay. It's okay to keep tweaking your budget. And having that mindset, two things happen. One, it's very emotional. If you physically hand somebody a 20 versus swiping your card, tremendous difference there. It's a lot harder for me to fork over that 20. But also, when you start to have this mentality, just like with buying a house, when you think you're ready to buy a house and you want to get as educated as you can, you want to be prepared for all those expenses that come along with that you don't think of. All you're thinking of is having a place to live that in a lot of situations is better than where you are now, and you're excited for that. But you need to keep the reality in mind that comes with a cost. And one of the workshops we do helps first-time home buyers anticipate what those costs are going to be. I do it with a pet. We got a new dog a few years ago. He's hanging out back there.
Yep, taking a nap.
Yeah, he hasn't woken up once.
No. I think budgeting is a snoozer.
I know, and he watches me do it all day long. When we first decided we were going to get a dog, I went to the vet. And we had been doing budgeting for a while. We were still living on cash envelopes at the time. And I went into the vet where I had never been because I didn't have a dog in this community. And I asked them for all of the expenses assuming I have a healthy dog, all of the expenses for the year. And they looked at me like I was crazy because no one had asked for that before. It took them a few weeks to put it together, but they gave that to me and I was able to plug that into my budget and say, can I afford this dog? There's some families choose to have insurance for their dogs. Can you afford the insurance? Can you afford the vaccines? These things are really important because they're not cheap. My dog's vet bills are 3 times my children's pediatrician visits.
Yeah.
So it's important to budget for that. So having that structure to be able to go home and sit down with your partner or just yourself and say, can I afford this decision, whatever it is? So doing as much homework as you can, coming to us and understanding what decisions you're making today will affect you down the road. It's just peace of mind. It calms that anxiety, regardless of what your financial situation is when you first come in.
Yeah, so I think some of the things that are important is the first thing is to identify with your partner, what is this a want or a need? And sometimes there's some beefy discussions about that. I did that in March. We had that conversation and we battled. I'm like, how do you define that as a need? That's not a need, that's a want. And then the whole thing ensued, but we came to the same page. It took us a while, but we came to the same page on what was a desire versus a need. And then just kind of going at it together. But so thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. Is there any question? Does anybody have any questions or anything in the chat box?
You guys don't have anything in the chat box at this time?
Okay. Okay, if you can put the contact information up, Kayla, we would really appreciate that.
I do want to speak to something if I can.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I'm familiar with the envelope system, which I like the idea of that, but what about all this constant talk of an no cash society, which seems to be threatening and pouring down on us? What then?
That's a really great question too. And I've been thinking about that a lot this week. Most of the businesses in our area have stopped taking cash. They are asking that you please pay with a debit or a credit card, and they don't have coins. There is a national coin shortage right now. So we do have to address that. Now, while we still have cash, while we're still in a cash society, you want to get on that envelope system because it's a training tool. You're not on the envelope system forever. You're only on it for the time it takes for you to be conditioned to not need the envelopes anymore. So you want to get conditioned as fast as you can because of what we know about society right now. Now, there's nothing that says cash is completely going away yet, but it's all about training your spending habits and how can you start to feel what is a good amount for that category, and then you're building your physical budget, and then using a debit card is okay because you're keeping track. So it's about getting into the habit of going line by line in your budget and then tracking your expenses as you're making them and getting comfortable with that process. And at that point, using a debit card, and I highly encourage debit cards obviously over credit cards, using the debit card will just become the new envelope for you.
That's a really good question, Terry. I didn't even know what you meant when you said that, but then with the response, you're right. There's a lot of people that are saying, I can't take cash. And originally I was like, what do you mean you can't take cash? Because of the COVID. I had no idea that was even going to come down the pike. Yeah, really good question. Emily, thank you. Thank you guys for listening in. I appreciate it. Please share this information. There's going to be a slide up, Emily, about how to reach out to the folks at CCCS MD. And if they have any questions, this is the best way to reach you, I guess. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, ladies. Emily, thank you. I think our next call, we talked about doing 5 factors contributing to your credit score. So what impacts your credit score? And it's really enlightening to hear some of that information. So I'm really excited about that, and we'll post the date here shortly. But until then, have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Thank you.
You too. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Emily, take care. Bye, Terry.
Bye-bye. Thank you.